When you go to a party and you're a professional piano player, guess what? People want you to play a song on the piano. And when you go to a party and you're a fee-only financial advisor, people want your advice on how they can reach their financial goals. And the most common goal is, I'd like to become a millionaire. I'd like to be able to retire. So in today's video, I'm going to talk with you about, from my experience, 20 years as a financial advisor, how do millionaires become millionaires? And I'm going to talk about two main studies. The first study, and we have a lot of data on this, is by a gentleman by the name of Thomas Corley. And he wrote a book called Rich Habits, where he interviewed hundreds of millionaires. And then we're also going to talk about the Ramsey Solution Group's survey of over 10,000 millionaires and what are their habits and how did they become millionaires. So let's jump in. Let's first talk about the Rich Habits book. And Thomas Corley would say, there are basically four ways people became millionaires. And he breaks them into four different categories. The first category is a big company corporate climber. So they work at a large company, they've been there a long time and they've climbed the ladder and now they're making good money. So that's the first one. The second one is a virtuoso. And a virtuoso, I mentioned the professional piano player at the beginning, is somebody that's highly skilled at something that takes a lot of training, maybe a professional piano player. More commonly, I think of like a surgeon. Takes a lot of education, takes a lot of licensing. Not everybody can do it. And it pays a lot of money. So the second way people become millionaires, according to Thomas Corley's book, which is Rich Habits, is by being a virtuoso. The third way is by being an entrepreneur. They started a company, they worked hard, they put blood, sweat, and tears into that company. And after 7, 10, 20 years, they became an overnight success and hopefully had a liquidity event and became a millionaire, hopefully a multi-millionaire. But the fourth way is the way that I think most of us fall into, and that is what Corley calls the saver and investor. And importantly, it's not just the saver and it's not just the investor, it's the saver investor. And Corley says that these folks were able to save 20% of their pre-tax income. So that's a lot of money and really hard to do in today's world. He goes on and talks about some of their expenditures. They spent less than 25% of their salary on housing. Super hard to do today. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. Spent less than 15% on housing supplies and food. And then interestingly, while the average US consumer spends over 15% of their salary on transportation, typically 2 cars in a household, insurance, gasoline, maintenance, repairs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Comes down to about 15% of your income for the average American family. But for these next door millionaires, these saver investors, it was less than 5%, which, you think about is super hard to do for somebody making $100,000 a year. That means for their car payment, for their maintenance, their insurance, and gasoline, they're spending less than $5,000 a year. That means they're probably buying a used car and they're paying cash for it, so they don't have a cash payment. But, I do want to share here that Corley's book was written in 2010. And when you look at the housing cost on that, housing costs in 2010, the median house in the United States was selling for $175,000 back then. And that number's over doubled, obviously, in the years since Corley first published his book in 2010. But the concept of being a saver investor is really key, right? I don't care how much money that you earn. If you want to build wealth, you have to spend less than you earn. And I'm a big fan, and I know it's aspirational, but I'm a big fan of the 50-30-20 rule, which is, remember, Corley was talking about pre-tax income. My 50-30-20 is after you pay your taxes. So this is your gross after-tax pay. And before you put any money in a 401k or any savings, this is just your gross pay. 50% goes to needs, 30% goes to wants, and again, aspirational. You try to save at least 20%. And, I think many of us could do it. And once we're on that path, I don't think it would feel very sacrificial to us. But if you're not saving 10% right now, start where you are. Do what you can to start saving. But most people, once they're on that plan, and I've been on that plan for many, many years myself, it's never felt sacrificial to me, but it's kind of the only life I've ever known. I've always that old adage, pay yourself first, right? There's a reason I became a financial advisor. I did my first financial plan when I was 20 years old. How many 20-year-olds do that, right? But I think that is something as we get older and we mature and we realize that these materialistic things don't bring us as much joy as we thought that they might when we didn't have them and when we were younger. I think it gets easier to start saving more than 10%. So enough said on that, but it's the saver and investor. Remember, they're not called the savers. They're called the savers and investors. It's not enough to just save. You also need to invest. And really what you're working for there is to get a return over time that beats inflation. So compounding can work for you. Really important, because compounding giveth and compounding can take away. So if you just put that money in what feels like the low risk investment alternative, which for many people is money in the bank, well, if that money is earning less than inflation, then compounding's working against you. Instead of your money working harder for you each year, your money's actually taking money away from you each year, at least from a purchasing power after inflation standpoint. The second study that I talked about is the Ramsey Solutions Group. And this is really a very strong study. It's over 10,000 millionaires. And one of the things they share with us, and it's lots of data out there, I've shared it before on this before, but 1 in 12 Americans are millionaires. That's a wonderful thing. And there's 1,700 of us being made each and every day in the United States. And importantly, over a third of those millionaires never made more than $100,000 a year. If you look at the top careers are engineer, accountants, lawyers, managers, and teachers, right? So it really is, no matter how much you get paid, you have to spend less than what you earn. And again, you have to actually invest that. Ramsey also identifies that over 80% of the millionaires in the United States were self-made. They didn't inherit a large sum of money, which a lot of people think, well, it'd be easy to do that. If I inherited some money, it'd be easy to be a millionaire. And maybe yes, and maybe no. I know some folks that have inherited money, and while that sounds great, it also comes with its own baggage. But importantly, Ramsey saw that 80% of people did it themselves. And you know what? If 1,700 Americans a day can do it, you and I can do it again. And one of the next step, kind of the second half of this, is that I want you to watch this video up here that talks about the net worth and the income of people in the top 1, the top 10, and the top 20%. I want you to see where you're at, and I suspect you're doing much better than what you think you are. I'll see you in that video. Thanks for watching this one. Bye-bye.